Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Week 12 Highlight Haven NFL Recap Show. I am your host, Matthew Heiserman, and today we are joined by Josh Wolver of Josh's Sports Report to break down each and every game that took place during Week 12 of the NFL season. Josh, it's great to have you on.
Thanks for having me on, Matt, and let's get into this one.
And as always, we will be taking callers throughout the stream, so feel free to call in using the link in the chat. With that being said, we have a lot of great games to break down, so let's jump right into it. Starting with Titans at Texans. The Titans ended up winning this one 32-27. Definitely a surprise, I would say. I'll let you start here. What do you see?
Yeah, surprise is an understatement. We talked about the Texans' struggles coming into this game, but how this was one of those ones that was just sort of get back on track game, but they lose by 5, 32-27. They fall to 7-5 on the year, and they take a really bad safety at the end of the game. CJ Stroud backs up into his own end zone, doesn't know how much room he has, and steps back out of bounds and gets sacked, which evidently ended the game. But to be honest, there's no reason that Houston needed to be in that situation, down 3, trying to have a 2-minute drill there to try and finish off the game. Tennessee played a really great game, but it was a CJ Stroud turnover fest, and really it was a turnover fest on both sides. Will Levis 1 interception, CJ Stroud 2, but Will Levis's 1 interception was a pick 6 returned by the Texans for a touchdown. And then this game, the sacks, the offensive lines were terrible on both sides. You're talking about 8 sacks for Tennessee. It was just ridiculous. And multiple by Will Anderson. Texans gave up 4. There was a combined 10 punts. There was a combined 17 penalties. The Titans also lost 2 fumbles in addition to their interceptions. While this game was high scoring, there was a lot of sloppy play. And when you look at things for Houston, Joe Mixon has been their consistency all year. We talked about how great he's been coming in. This was a game, 14 carries, 22 yards. That's 1.6 yards per carry. He was just terrible. Nico Collins started to make up for a little bit, 92 yards and a touchdown grab. And then for Tennessee, a huge reason why they pulled this off, and a huge reason why my fantasy team did well this week. Tony Pollard, 119 yards, a touchdown on 24 carries. He was a beast. Tennessee gets a scrappy win. I'd call it at that. By no means perfect, but Matt, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, as you mentioned, the Texans had no means losing this game. And the Titans aren't going to make the playoffs. That's simple. So I think all this does, it doesn't really prove anything for the Titans. What it proves is that the Texans are an extremely fraudulent team.
I agree.
They've lost to the Jets earlier this year. Now they've lost to the Titans, and I don't trust them in the playoffs. It's that simple. I don't trust them in the playoffs. Nick Westbrook-Ikhine has 6 touchdowns in his last 7 games. He's been an absolute beast past week 7. As you mentioned, Tony Pollard had a great game. CJ Stroud threw 2 interceptions. He did throw 2 touchdowns as well. 2 interceptions, though, definitely a little tough for him. And in 12 games this season, Stroud has thrown 9 interceptions. Last year in 15 games, he threw just 5 interceptions. So that tells you kind of how he's just been turning the ball over a lot more this season, which is obviously, I guess you could call it a sophomore slump. I don't know if it's necessarily a slump because he's had a solid season, but Nico
Definitely,
Collins.
definitely not what we saw out of him last year. We were expecting progression, but it's been regression.
It's hard to progress based on what he did last season, though, and I think we might have set our expectations too high that we were expecting more. It's really hard to produce more. If he was producing more, he'd probably be the best quarterback in the league right now. But overall, just a very concerning game for the Texans that doesn't necessarily mean much in Week 12, but could show a lot of their true identity come the playoffs. So, moving over, though, we have Vikings at Bears. Vikings 30-27 victory. John Parker Romo knocked down a game-winning field goal for the Vikings in this one. And the Bears were extremely close to making a crazy comeback. Chicago was down 27-16 with under 30 seconds remaining. Caleb Williams found Keenan Allen in the end zone for a 6 before DJ Moore called the 2-point conversion. Then the Bears recovered an onside kick and made a field goal to tie the game as time expired. However, it wasn't quite enough. In overtime, Minnesota did end up winning. Sam Darnold looked pretty good out there. 22 of 34, 330 passing yards, and 2 touchdowns. Aaron Jones also 22 carries, 106 rushing yards, and a touchdown. Not much from Justin Jefferson in this one, but Jordan Addison really picked up his slack, 8 receptions for 162 receiving yards and a touchdown, as well as TJ Hawkinson, who got 7 receptions for 114 receiving yards. Despite the loss, I'd say Caleb Williams had his best game of the year so far. He went 32 of 47, 340 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Which is, I know last week we were saying he had one of his best games, and it was like a really mediocre game. This is actually a really good game. So at least Bears fans can be proud of that, even if they're on a 5-game losing streak. In their next 6 games also, they play the Lions twice, and then they also play the 49ers, Vikings, Seahawks, and Packers. So I wouldn't be surprised if this Bears team doesn't pick up another win for the rest of the season, other than maybe a Week 18 victory, depending on who's starting or sitting.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway from this game is obviously Caleb Williams. I mean, clap it up for him. 340, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. He went 32 of 47, by far his best game in the pros. And this is really what Chicago was looking for. You didn't know if it was going to come this year. You didn't know if the progression was going to take time, but there were already talks of him being a bust in this league through his first 11 weeks as a starting quarterback. And he showed his true potential yesterday. He showed what he can do. Obviously, despite the loss, Chicago knew heading in this was a tough game. Divisional opponent that was heading in on 8-2. Now they improved to 9-2. And then from the Vikings' perspective of things, you see another great game from Sam Darnold. We were talking about how after the first 5 weeks he regressed a little bit and wasn't the guy we saw at the beginning. He is back to that form, I guess in this game at least. 330, 2 touchdowns. And you're right, what an amazing comeback from the Bears. They scored 17 fourth quarter points, 10 of those coming within the last 30 seconds of the game. So even to force overtime is impressive for Chicago. They pull off an onside kick after the ball hits off a Minnesota special teamer's foot and takes a weird hop. That was very interesting. The big thing here is the rushing comparison. Aaron Jones, 22 carries, 106 yards, a touchdown. He's quickly emerging as a lead role player for this Vikings team, and he's a big reason why they rushed for 124 yards. And then for Chicago, it was almost the opposite. You had DeAndre Swift, 13 carries, 30 rushing yards. Your leading rusher was Caleb Williams scrambling, 6 carries, 33 yards. Nothing was going right. They only got 78 rushing yards. But Minnesota deserved this win. 452 total yards is pretty mind-boggling. The penalties killed the Bears, 7 for 80 yards. Both teams lost a fumble in this one. But yeah, regardless, the Bears forced overtime, forced a last-second field goal try. You got to be happy where you are if you're a Chicago fan. You love what Caleb Williams did today. You understand that the running game will continue to develop with DeAndre Swift, and that is not it's not a game that you thought you would win going in, but I'd say the Bears definitely exceeded expectations, dropping 27 in this one.
I mean, it at least showed what Caleb can do in the future. Seeing games like this gives you hope. I don't think that the Bears fans had much hope after the first 11 weeks. This was definitely a bright spot. Now, speaking of onside kicks, a team that cannot complete an onside kick is the Washington Commanders. This was a atrocious game. And I'm not just saying the ending was atrocious as a Commanders fan. The entire game was atrocious up until about the final 4 minutes. And believe it or not, in the final 4 minutes of the game, in the final 4 minutes of the game, 31 points were scored. That's over 7 points a minute in the final.
Should have been 32, Matt. Just playing.
It should have been 32. You're right about that one. For anyone who didn't watch the game, I'm going to keep this quick, but the ending was absolutely insane. John Bates fumbled the ball for the Commanders, which led to a Dallas touchdown. Then with Dallas up by 11, the Commanders drove down the field and scored a touchdown of their own, as well as a 2-point conversion, cutting the Cowboys' lead down to just 3 points. However, KaVontae Turpin returned Washington's kickoff for a touchdown on the next play. Then Austin Seibert made a field goal that brought the game back into one possession. Then the Commanders forced a Dallas punt before Jaden Daniels found Terry McLaurin for an 86-yard touchdown, with Washington down by just 1 point.
Oh.
An extra point would have tied the game, and Austin Seibert missed the extra point,
No.
and the Commanders were forced to try an onside kick, which was returned for a touchdown by Dallas. Yeah,
Wow.
I mean,
What a
that's absurd.
game.
And there were even points up to this game that were just this sloppy. I mean, we're talking about the worst I've seen this Commanders offense play all season long. It was a terrible game. I mean, they were extraordinarily sloppy. And there were even plays that didn't go into the into the stats. Like, I don't know if you saw this play where there was a Commanders interception and then like the ball got popped out and went back to Dallas and it was caught by an offensive line. It was just a wacky game. There were like 5 turnovers or punts back to back. One point the Commanders had 3 and outs in a row. Atrocious game. I can't emphasize that enough. Running backs also got banged up for the Commanders in this one. Brian Robinson Jr. left the game in the first quarter after rolling his ankle. He did eventually return, but didn't get a single carry in the second half. Austin Eckler also suffered a concussion on one of the final plays of the game. That was just unnecessary and really hurt to watch because there's no reason he should be suffering a concussion with 10 minutes or 10 seconds left in the game or whatever it was. Now, I'm going to be honest, I don't really have that much faith in the Commanders right now because they started the season hot, obviously, 7-2, and they haven't been able to win after that. And they haven't proven that they can beat a single good team. That's really concerning to me. And I understand that it's year one of the rebuild, and setting my expectations for a Super Bowl right now is unrealistic. But obviously, that's what I'm hoping for. And right now, that doesn't seem like we're remotely close to that outcome.
Yeah, Matt. I mean, you described this exactly right. Wild game. I mean, from you as a Commanders fan, I know if this happened to the Jets, I would have just been distraught. So, I feel for you, man. I feel for you. This is just one of those rough games. I feel like every year each team is just bound to have that 1 or 2 games that you're like, I don't know how we possibly lost that, but we did. I mean, this is a Dallas team that you had no faith in coming in. They score 3 first half points. Cooper Rush looks terrible. There is nothing going on offense. And then all of a sudden, it's just becomes a special teams fiasco. That Turpin return, the spin move, 99 yards. And you got to remember, it wasn't like that was beautiful all around. He muffed it at the beginning. He fumbled. He had to go back. He
That
picked it up.
spin
There
move
were
was
defenders
beautiful,
meeting
though.
him at the 9-yard line. That probably should have been a loss of 15 from what he probably should have got tackled at the 15-yard line. He spins out of it and goes 100 yards for the touchdown. That was crazy. And then the extra point, it just went all wrong. I mean, the snap was low. I think the spot was actually pretty good, and then I think that what happened was the snap messed up Seibert's rhythm, and he took a half step back and he just hooked it, and the ball. If you watch that instant replay, that ball was super wobbly. That ball had no good aerodynamics behind it. And that's why he missed. And the score looked inflated for what it was. It probably should have been a Washington 1-point loss, but Dallas returned the onside kick right after, which was honestly a mistake. But whatever, it counts for a touchdown on the scorebook. Cooper Rush, definitely his best game since Dak got hurt. 247 yards, 2 touchdowns. It was a turnover fiasco for the Commanders. 2 Jaden Daniels interceptions thrown. They also fumbled the ball. Jaden Daniels, a rushing touchdown. McLaurin continues his amazing year, and Ertz also finds the end zone. But, Matt, you're the Commanders fan that's watching all these games. It certainly seems like it in the stat sheet recently. Is this Jaden Daniels regression something that we need to worry about and look at going forward?
I don't know if it's that much of a Jaden Daniels specific regression rather than a whole team regression, and that the offense has just generally been in a slump. Obviously, he has part to do with that, but it's not worth worrying about considering he went out and had about the best, first 9 weeks you could hope from any quarterback. He's still, like, you look at Caleb, and if you're not worried about him, absolutely no reason to be worried about Jaden whatsoever. and I made a post on X. It said cut Austin Seibert, and I know you saw that. You commented about the bad snap and whatever. He also missed a field goal earlier that
Right.
game, and I don't think we
Didn't he miss
realistically should.
2 extra points or yeah, he missed
Yeah,
2
yeah,
extra points and a
he did
field
miss
goal
2 extra
actually,
points,
so
yes. So, yeah, it was a bad kicking. Commanders should have been up, I think it was
mm,
10-9, and then they tied it. They got 9
right,
points.
and
Bad
that
kicking
forced him to go
performance
for
in
2 at
general.
the end there.
And Brandon Aubrey struggled too. I don't
Right.
know if it was something specific about the
Mhm.
kickers in that game, but it wasn't a good game. I don't think we should actually cut him because he we call him Automatic Austin. That's his new nickname, with the Commanders, and we can't forget about what he did to start for us. I mean, he
Mm,
went about 5 weeks or something without missing a kick. He missed 1 and then kept going, didn't miss a kick. This was just one bad game. All kickers have them. Justin Tucker's had a bad year, an entire year.
right.
So, I mean, cut him some slack. It's tough because kicker is a position where one mistake gets you cut.
Mhm.
It's just a
Right.
very slim position, especially when Zane Gonzalez came in and made all of his kicks last week. But still, I think we keep going with him. Give him another week, see how it goes. Any more mistakes, then maybe it becomes more interesting. But for right now, he can stay. Patriots at Dolphins, though, definitely not as close of a game. Dolphins won 34-15. I've been talking for a while, Josh. I'll let you get it started here.
Yeah, 34-15, but the New England basically gets some sympathy touchdowns there at the
Mhm.
end. We talked about Drake May playing really well. Not so much this game. The 222 yards looks great, but only a touchdown and an interception. They got nothing going offensively. They went into the half down 24-0. They went into the fourth quarter down 30 33-0. So they score 15. One's on a scoop and score defensively. But the main thing when you look at it is that I think this Dolphins offense, they can. I mean, obviously, the Dolphins are a good enough team to beat the good and mediocre teams. I just don't think they have enough firepower to beat those star-studded teams. Like obviously against New England here, Tua goes 317, 4 touchdowns. It's ridiculous. Not as much in the running department like I predicted. Jalen Waddle, absolutely huge game, the biggest of the season, 144 yards and a touchdown. Maybe there was one other week, I think, where he also went off. Johnny Smith has been emerging as a big threat, honestly, in the tight end game. He's not someone when you look up and down the Dolphins roster that you would highlight and say, yeah, this is going to be the guy scoring a touchdown a week. But he is on pace for a career year, another 87 yards and a touchdown to his name in this one. Tyreek Hill, not as much of a factor, but the Dolphins just played a team game. They dominated the first half, and that's what you have to do against the bad teams. They let up on the gas pedal a little bit in the second half. I said this was going to be a big game for Miami, possibly, what was it, last year, 2 years ago when they dropped 70 on Denver. I wasn't expecting it to be that big, but I certainly thought it'd be a blowout. And besides one terrible misplay from backup Skylar Thompson and miscommunication there, scored a New England touchdown. I credit myself because I truly think this was a blowout. What you learned here for New England is that they're 100% still rebuilding. There's nothing wrong with Drake May. This was one bad game. It's hard to go into Miami and play well. But even with this win, Dolphins are only at 5-6, so they've got a lot of work to do. They're 100%. They're on the outside looking in big time in the AFC playoff picture. Matt, I'll let you voice your opinions here.
And I mean, I think they have a chance to make the playoffs. Obviously, it's going to be tough in the AFC and the NFC for that matter. But 5-6, they're going to have to not quite win out. Maybe they can maybe afford to lose one game, two at max. It's going to be difficult, but they are on a 3-game winning streak, so I guess anything is possible. Patriots in this game were 3 of 14 on third downs, and they got called for 10 penalties, which amounted to 75 yards. Devon Achane had 2 receiving touchdowns, obviously, to go along with the Jalen Waddle and Jonnu Smith touchdowns that you mentioned. Miami hasn't swept the Patriots in consecutive seasons since 1999 to 2000, which is pretty crazy considering the fact that they play 2 times every year. And I mean, of course, it's the Tom Brady led Patriots,
Right.
so you can't be that surprised. That's basically when he took over for them. but still a crazy stat there. And then Tua's 7-0 against the Patriots in his career. Overall, I don't have that much to say about this game. Just a pretty dominant win for the Dolphins. But moving over to the next game, not so much of a dominant win and a crazy outcome. Chiefs at Panthers. Chiefs 30-27 victory. Spencer Schrader made a game-winning field goal for the Chiefs as time expired. Of course, Chuba Hubbard got a touchdown that tied it up for Carolina. But we know how the Chiefs work. You can't give them too much time. They're going to drive down the field. Mahomes got a long run that set up the game-winning kick. Mahomes in this game had one of his better games of the season, if not his best game of the season. 27 of 37, 269 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. Of course, that came on the game where I sat him in fantasy. So I think that's
Ooh.
yeah. I sat him for Herbert. I think it was a good decision.
That's
Fantasy
also my platoon. I
yeah,
started Mahomes this week, though.
yeah, Fantasy Pros had Herbert over Mahomes. I had a gut feeling he was going to do better, and I already predicted Herbert's going to have 300 plus passing yards and 4 touchdowns. So now I really hope he does, although it looks like I'm going to win that game either way. But Mahomes had a really good game. Noah Gray was actually his main target. 4 receptions, 66 receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns. Bryce Young's kind of developing as a solid quarterback in the NFL. I'm not going to say solid, but he's working his way to getting there. He was 21 of 35, 263 passing yards and a touchdown, 0 interceptions, which is some good progress for Young right there. David Moore had 6 receptions, 81 receiving yards and a touchdown. Can't guarantee that I fully knew who that was before this game. So props to him for having a big game. And this is Mahomes' 21st game-winning drive of his career. And 8 of the Chiefs' 10 wins this season have come from within one possession. All this game proves is the fact that the Chiefs are still extremely fraudulent and struggle against bad competition. I mean, yeah, they've won 10 games this season, but it's like you're gonna have close wins against the Broncos. You're gonna have close wins against the Panthers, and it's like, how much can we really trust this team? Obviously, this has kind of been a storyline throughout the entire season, but this game definitely didn't help.
Yeah, I want to go back to a point you made earlier that Bryce Young is developing into a solid quarterback in this league. And I'm going to have to disagree with you. That's because, I mean, this is a guy that got benched earlier, and the only reason he started is because Andy Dalton got into a car crash. This is a guy that was the #1 pick overall and was an absolute bust last year. I'll give him some slack because he was in a terrible offensive system with Matt Rule, who absolutely trashed him and gave him absolutely no weapons and treated him like garbage. So I guess you can't really blame him that much, but by no means is he a solid quarterback in my eyes because he contended with the Chiefs in this one game. Just wanted to put that out there. Chuba Hubbard's been a dog for the Panthers. Not his biggest game, 58 yards, but he did have a touchdown that tied the game there, so that was pretty big. Patty Mahomes, yeah, 3 touchdowns. You like it? I mentioned on the tailgate show that this was kind of one of those games that Andy Reid might just unleash Patrick Mahomes and try and get him back into a rhythm. And I think he did a solid job of that. Obviously, when you're keeping it within 3 with a #1 pick contender, you can't say you did too well, but that you can blame a lot on the defense there for the Chiefs. The fact that this game was kept so close. They improved to 10-1, best record in the AFC. But you're right, Matt. The main point is against who? What does this mean? What's the deeper meaning? The deeper meaning is not that they are good enough to be a 10-1 football team. The deeper meaning is that they've been able to come out on the plus side of a lot of 50-50 games, right? And I'm not saying it's lucky because you can't win 10 football games with just luck, but I'm saying that they put themselves in bad situations and have been able to frantically get out of them is
Yeah.
kind of the simplest way to put it, even though that's not so simple. But looking ahead, they have the Raiders on Black Friday, which should be a easy pick me up game. And we also said that against the Panthers, so I guess that could go either way.
I
But
feel like the Raiders always keep it close against the Chiefs, though.
the Raiders always keep it close against
Yeah.
the Chiefs, and I agree with you. But it's always when the Raiders have nothing to play for. and the Chiefs are competing for the number 1 seed is when they always keep it close. So yes, that perfectly fits the bill with these circumstances. Are you ready to move over to Giants Buccaneers, Matt?
Yeah, and actually, real quick before we do that, though, the
Yeah.
Raiders have picked up wins, obviously, this year they picked up that win against the
Buffalo.
Ravens earlier.
Mhm.
So, and that's kind of their one big win of the season. They lost to the Chiefs by 7 earlier this season. So I'm not saying that they're going to win that game, and we'll get to this during our tailgate show for that game. But
Mhm.
I think there's a solid shot that they at least split the series with Kansas City because they can keep it close against these solid teams, especially as you mentioned, when there's absolutely nothing to play for and they kind of just want to go out there and win a game.
I agree. I think Vegas is always sort of a sneaky team no matter what their roster it looks like. It's just sort of that Raider DNA. Go out there, play hard, and see what happens. But let's move over to Buccaneers Giants in the Meadowlands. 30-7 is your final. This game, absolute blowout. It's what we expected. Buccaneers took a 30-0 lead. Giants score a sympathy touchdown there at the end with Devin Singletary. Make the score look a little bit better. Baker Mayfield didn't throw a touchdown. That's because it was all in the rushing department. Bucky Irving, Rashid White, Mayfield himself, and Sean Tucker. That's 4 Buccaneer rushing touchdowns to go along with 294 passing yards for Baker Mayfield. Mike Evans in his return to the lineup, 68 yards. And then the Giants. Look, this team is a mess. You bring in, you put Tommy DeVito in to start, 189 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. Cutting Daniel Jones was because they needed a scapegoat. Daniel Jones was the best player on the Giants roster. No matter how bad he was, he's better than Tommy DeVito. I mean, maybe you give Drew Lock a shot. I heard guys on WFAN, I think maybe it was the Tiki Show. I'm not quite sure, but don't quote me on this. They said Tommy DeVito was the best guy on the Giants roster. I mean, I think that is honestly ridiculous.
Are they saying quarterback, I'm assuming?
Yeah. Sorry,
Uh,
quarterback on the Giants roster
uh,
before they cut Daniel Jones, but Daniel Jones was sort of just a scapegoat in a terrible system. Tyrone Tracy, 42 rushing yards, but absolutely nothing went wrong with the Giants. And you also had some tensions boil after up. I'm not sure if you got a chance to listen to Malik Neighbors' short press conference with the media after this game. And if you didn't, go ahead and take a listen right after this. But he was upset. I mean,
yeah.
they were asking him questions about, like, did he talk to the coaching staff about getting the ball? He's like, or like, what was your impact on this game? He was like, he had fire in his voice. He was like, I can't do anything. They only start passing me the ball when we're down 30-0, and it's not my fault they don't throw me the ball. So that's not what you want with a rookie wide receiver that you sort of want as your franchise guy. You do not want him talking bad about your plays there. But Giants fall to 2-9, another number 1 pick contender. Buccaneers improved to 5-6 with a good win over a terrible team. And they still have a chance in the South.
I mean, I think they have a chance. Actually, I take that back. They definitely
Let
have a
me
chance.
let me look at their
Um,
schedule. They
no,
have
actually,
Panthers, Raiders, Chargers,
mhm.
Cowboys, Panthers, Saints. They've got a chance,
Yeah,
Matt.
I think that I actually had their schedule written down. I think that the Chargers are the only good team they play. Other than that, that's a 5 wins. So yeah, they could finish out 10-7. That's definitely a division win.
Right. Exactly.
So, not definitely a division win, but I think
Mm.
definitely at least a shot to win the division. I'm not loving the Falcons right now. We'll see what
Mhm.
happens with them, but yeah, they do have a shot. I think you kind of covered everything there was to cover about this game. I mean, Tampa Bay had 200 more yards than New York in this one. Tommy DeVito, I said it. Some people are gonna like him more than Jones. Some people aren't gonna like him more than Jones. But either way, he was gonna go out here and he was gonna struggle. That's exactly
Mhm.
what he did. 21 of 31, 189 passing yards. Just an overall messy, terrible game for the Giants that one, I
Mhm.
think they definitely wish they could get back. At this point, it's kind of tanking season for them, and I think they're all in on probably getting a quarterback in this draft.
Mm.
Although that it could be questionable because I don't know if you want to take a quarterback, depending on if they get like a top 3 pick. I don't know if there's really quarterback value up there, but I definitely see them going after a quarterback, whether it is maybe reaching on one, whether it's trading down. They need someone to play with Malik Neighbors who can get him the ball, as you were mentioning earlier. So definitely expect to see them do that over the offseason.
Yeah, and I
Now
just wanted
moving
to say
on.
my favorite part of this game was the Baker Mayfield mocking Tommy DeVito
Oh yeah.
celebration.
Mhm.
That was the best
Yeah.
part of this game, especially if you're not a Giants or Buccaneers fan. But this one was a blowout. But I'm ready to move over to Lions Colts if you are.
Yeah, Lions 24, Colts 6. This one was in Indianapolis. Not an interesting game by any means. I mean, Jared Goff, 26 of 36, 269 passing yards. I feel like we see it with him a lot where his stats don't look immaculate, but the Lions still pick up a solid win, and that's just because they don't really always need him that much. I think he's solidified himself as without a doubt, a top 10 quarterback in the league. With that being said, oftentimes Detroit just finds themselves relying on the run game. Jahmyr Gibbs in this one, 21 carries, 90 rushing yards, and 2 touchdowns. David Montgomery also got a touchdown. He has 11 touchdowns in 11 games so far this season. Anthony Richardson, 11 of 28, 172 passing yards. Definitely not a great completion percentage there. His main target was Michael Pittman, who got 6 receptions for 96 receiving yards. Detroit is on a 9-game winning streak, and the Lions advanced to 10-1 for the first time since 1934. And I mean, their defense has looked a lot better than I feel like I thought they would look. Because there's a lot of situations where they have allowed 10 to 6 points per game. And that's kind of overshadowed by the fact that they score 50 points per game. Um, but no, they've been a really solid defense that's been keeping their opponents to very minimal scoring. And this one was another situation of that. And I think we're actually used to seeing the Lions score more than 24 points. So it was almost an underwhelming performance on offense that Jared Goff didn't get a touchdown in this one, didn't pass for a touchdown in this one. Amon-Ra had 9 straight games with a receiving touchdown leading up to this game. That streak was broken in this one. But overall, a win is a win, and Detroit advances to 10-1. The Colts' playoff hopes are most likely down the drain at this point.
Yeah, I agree with that. By no means Detroit's best game of the season. They punted 4 times, but when you hold a team to 6 points and you have that kind of offense, you are not going to have any problems. And I certainly agree with you. Despite the Lions' amazing offense, their defense has also looked incredible. This game, you probably knew it was over at half. Not the start Detroit was looking for, going down 3-zip at the first quarter, but then they scored 2 touchdowns, heading into halftime with an 11-point lead, and that's when you sort of knew the Colts pretty much had no chance. This was not a great game by any means for Anthony Richardson. I continue to talk about the Colts' inconsistency at quarterback. They're unsure really at quarterback, 172 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. That's on 11 completions, Matt. That's pretty terrible. And then Jonathan Taylor, when he got the ball, absolutely terrible. I can tell you firsthand. He was unfortunately a starter on my fantasy team. I think picked up sub 3 points, 35 yards on 11 carries. Was not looking pretty. The one bright spot was Michael Pittman, who continues to be very consistent. For the Colts, for the Lions, has Jahmyr Gibbs solidified himself as the number one back in the Sonic and Knuckles duo? 2 touchdowns, 90 yards on 21 carries. I think David Montgomery did go out for a little bit in this game, but
Yeah.
was able to return. Jamison Williams, 64 yards. Amon-Ra, not his biggest game, 62 yards, but Detroit wins a game they were expected to. They improved to 10-1, and as you look down their schedule, this is not an easy finish. They've got Bears, Packers, Bills, Bears, Niners, Vikings to close out the season. So very interesting. Detroit's going to get tested down the stretch here.
Yeah, and I think that, at least in my opinion, Gibbs has solidified that RB1 role
Agreed.
probably a few weeks ago, if you ask me. He's still, Montgomery's obviously really good. As I mentioned, 11 touchdowns in 11 games so far this season. He's definitely a power back, can be used at the goal line, also breaks off for a lot of longer touchdowns. But either way, I think Jahmyr Gibbs has been their more commonly, used back for, he's just been more utilized. That's the better way to put it. I think they're starting to rely on him a little bit more. But moving over to the next game, Broncos at Raiders. Broncos 29-19 victory. Bo Nix was 21 of 42 in this one, 273 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. If you ask me, I think right now he's leading in my mind for Rookie of the Year. And I know that Daniels is technically still the favorite, but I think people are gonna get affected by recency bias. Look at Daniels' past few games and say Bo Nix has overtaken him, and I actually do agree. I didn't agree with them last week. I am starting to agree with them now after the Commanders' terrible offensive performance where just nothing was working for them. Courtland Sutton, I mentioned the stretch that he's been on. That continues in this one. 8 receptions, 97 receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns. He has 5 straight games with 70-plus receiving yards, which is the longest streak by a Broncos player since Demaryius Thomas, 8 straight games with 70-plus receiving yards back in 2014. Gardner Minshew, 25 of 42. Both quarterbacks went 25 of 42 in this game, which is a little odd. I guess that's a just crazy coincidence there. 230 passing yards, a touchdown, and an interception. But the main story of the game for him, obviously, he suffered a season-ending collarbone injury, and Desmond Ridder ended up going in for him later in the game. Jacoby Myers, 10 receptions for 121 receiving yards, led the Raiders in receiving in this one. Las Vegas has lost 7 straight games. Broncos advance to 7-5.
Yeah, let's go back to that Rookie of the Year talk. Bo Nix, Jaden Daniels, the 2 quarterbacks, the rookies from Oregon. Bo Nix, 2 touchdowns in this game, 273 yards. It's been the consistency for me. There has not been a week, or I'm sure there has. I mean, against the Jets, he was pretty terrible. But there hasn't been many weeks, I should say, where Bo Nix has gone under the 250 threshold, where he hasn't thrown a touchdown pass, where he's turned the ball over multiple times. He's just been there, right? Jaden Daniels, we saw the slow start. They didn't score a touchdown against New York early in the season. We're seeing a bit of his woes come back, having trouble leading the Commanders' offense this week, had trouble against Philadelphia a week ago. Bo Nix, Mr. Consistent, I'd say. For the Broncos. And that's why right now, I think it's a toss-up. It could go either way. I think Jaden Daniels has shown you more firepower and more potential, and Bo Nix has just been that guy that's Mr. Reliable that can get the job done week in, week out. But they're certainly both great candidates right now, and credit to both of them. Courtland Sutton, another 2 touchdowns to his name. Jacoby Myers, 121 yards on 10 receptions. I think the best player of the day for Las Vegas, besides the Amir Abdullah touchdown, a receiving touchdown, was an A.J. Cole fake punt, executed absolutely beautifully. Cole faked like he was going to punt and then threw it wide open to one of the gunners over the middle, went for 34 and a first down, which was beautifully executed. Love me a good special teams play, man. You saw a lot of it in the Commanders game. No fakes.
You're just going to keep rubbing that in. Yeah.
Just missed field goals and missed extra points. But Broncos get it done, 10-point win. I called this a trap game against Las Vegas. They avoid it. By no means their cleanest game of the year, but they go to 7-5 as a rebuilding team, and you are not going to be complaining. You look ahead at their schedule, and we talked about this on the pregame show. Browns, Colts, Chargers, Bengals, Chiefs. So it certainly gets harder down the stretch, but Browns and Colts coming up as your 2 next games. You could certainly see even more progression from Bo Nix.
Yeah, and if you are watching this before we move over to the next game, make sure you do call in using the link in the chat that I just put on the screen right there. We are now going to move over to the next game, though. Cardinals at Seahawks. I don't know about you. I didn't really watch this one too closely. Probably the most boring game of the week, if you ask me. You know, that award has to go to one game every single week. This one probably takes the cake for week 12. Cardinals 6, Seahawks 16. 10-point win for Seattle. Kyler Murray, 24 of 37, 285 passing yards and an interception. Didn't get a touchdown in this one. Trey McBride, definitely the star of the game for Arizona. 12 receptions, 133 receiving yards. McBride had 45% of the Cardinals' total yards and 53% of their passing yards. So a very, very, very good game from him. But Arizona combined for just 49 rushing yards, which is really tough for them. Geno Smith, 22 of 31, 254 passing yards, touchdown, and an interception. I think he might lead the league in passing yards or at least be like second, but I don't think he's had any crazy games this year. It feels like he always gets around maybe 1 to 2 touchdowns. It's been a while since he hasn't thrown an interception, it feels like. Um so yeah, he gets a lot of yards, piles up the yards, but hasn't necessarily been the most consistent quarterback in the league. Actually, well, he has been consistent, just not necessarily in the best way. And I wouldn't say his impact on the game is necessarily reflected by the stats. I don't think he's been quite as good as the stats would say. Jackson Smith and Jigba, 6 receptions, 77 receiving yards, and 1 touchdown. This year, especially, I think he's been better than DK Metcalf, and I don't think that's a hot take by any means. He leads the Seahawks in receiving yards over Metcalf and has just solidified himself as a really, really, really good threat for Geno Smith and just a really good option in this Seattle offense. The Cardinals and Seahawks are now tied at 6-5, but Seattle leads the division because of this game and the tiebreaker rules. So it'll be interesting to see where they go from here in this really neck and neck division.
Yeah, Matt, you hit on some of the main points. Again, if you are watching this, and even if you don't want to call in, you can also type in. We're monitoring the chat, and we will be responding to questions, hot takes, anything you want to talk NFL related. We are open. Phone lines are open. Please be sure to call in if you would like to. We'd love to hear your voice. Cardinals 6, Seattle 16. They both Cardinals dropped to 6-5. Seattle improved to 6-5. Matt, you said you didn't watch this closely. Did you see the Kyler Murray interception?
I did see the Kyler Murray.
Yeah, might have been the worst throw of the year.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody I don't know. Maybe he was trying to throw it out of bounds. Very confusing. Threw it right into the lap of Kobe Bryant, who picked up some blocks and returned it 69 yards to the house for a pick six. I mean, that throw is absolutely awful. Absolutely terrible. I don't know what he was seeing. I don't know what he was trying to do. That throw confuses me big time. One of the worst throws. I mean, I've watched Zach Wilson football, and that's one of the worst throws I've seen on a football field. Absolutely horrendous from Kyler Murray. He does not pick up a touchdown in this game. You mentioned it. Arizona's rushing game, terrible. Trey Benson, 18 yards. Where was James Conner in this game? He was at the bottom of the stat sheet. 7 carries, 8 yards, 1.1 average. Certainly did not help. I thought I was going into a great week. Jonathan Taylor and James Conner were my 2 starting running backs in fantasy football. I think they might have combined for like 4 points. It wasn't a great week in the running back department. But Jordan Addison made up for it in that Vikings game. And you're right, Jackson Smith and Jigba, they sort of drafted this guy out of Ohio State thinking he'd be the replacement from Tyler Lockett, but he has quickly surged his way up the depth chart, becoming a apparent star in this league. I really like what he does. He was a great late round pickup for me, for my fantasy team. I know I keep mentioning them. And if you're wondering what our team name is, it's the Comeback Looks Mahomey. Shout out Chris Collinsworth. Geno Smith, 254 yards, a touchdown, an interception. By no means his best game. You talked about how consistent he's been. And consistency is a good word because he has been consistent, but it's been consistently mediocre, right? He hasn't been consistently good. He hasn't been consistently bad. He hasn't been the worst. He hasn't been the best. 1 touchdown, an interception, little over the 250 threshold. It's a bit better than average, but you're right. He has been consistent. Seattle, Arizona, that's a very tight division out there in the West, and we'll also get into what the 49ers did. But yeah, I mean, if we had to say right now, Matt, I think our options are Cardinals and Seahawks. Now that I'm not counting out the 49ers and Rams, but they both took losses this week. If you had to pick Arizona or Seattle, and I can also make the argument for the opposite, I put you on the spot here. What would your pick be if today? I mean, who do you got winning this?
What's the Rams' record after that loss?
I think they go to 5-6, so they're a game back.
I wouldn't count out the Rams right now, and I'm rooting for them because that's a team that I'm really high on. But if you make me choose between one of those 2 teams, the Cardinals or Seahawks, I'm familiar with their schedules right now. I'd probably
you can take the Rams. You can certainly take the Rams. I'm not going to stop you. They got a lot of divisional games coming up. They got Saints, Bills, Niners, Jets, and then Cardinals, Seahawks to round out the year.
I'd still probably lean towards the Cardinals. I understand they lost this one,
Mhm.
but I still think in general they're a better team. And Seahawks have had a lot of games that really make you question how good they are, even if they do lead the division. They haven't necessarily played, or maybe they've just gone under my radar, but it doesn't feel like they've played like a 6-5 team. Cardinals got off to a really bad start and have looked really, really solid since then. So it's felt like they've been a little better. I'd probably bet on Arizona right now. I'd say Los Angeles is in second, and then probably Seattle and 49ers. Speaking of 49ers, terrible loss for them. 38-10 Packers victory. Brandon Allen had to, and I should start by saying this was a really bad injury game for the 49ers. They didn't have Brock Purdy, they didn't have Nick Bosa, they didn't have Trent Williams. So those are three players that you immediately really wish you had right off the bat. Brandon Allen was their quarterback in this one, 17 of 29, 199 passing yards, a touchdown, and an interception. Not a terrible game, honestly, kind of what you could expect from Brock Purdy on a week-to-week basis. George Kittle, 6 receptions, 82 receiving yards, and a touchdown. Is it time to worry about CMC? I don't know. You tell me. He had just 68 scrimmage yards, and he's yet to score a single touchdown in 3 games so far this season. Scored 21 touchdowns last season, so maybe that's a bit of a concern. Overall, the 49ers offense just wasn't working today, and I think I said McCaffrey had 68 scrimmage yards. I think his rushing yards was more around like
31.
30, 30,
It was
31.
31.
Okay. So, yeah, not a great game from him, to say the least. Jordan Love, 13 of 23, 163 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. Only 13 completions. You might be wondering why. Well, Josh Jacobs in the run game was without a doubt the player of the game for Green Bay. 26 carries, 106 rushing yards, and 3 rushing touchdowns. What a game he had. Okay. I've been looking forward to giving you this stat for the entire episode. Ready?
Ready.
Josh Jacobs becomes the first player in the past 55 regular season games to rush for 100 yards against the 49ers. It was the longest a team had gone without allowing a 100-yard rusher since 1955. 55 games in a row, the 49ers didn't allow someone to get 100 rushing yards. That's over 3 seasons.
Yeah, that's what the absence of Nick Bosa will do to one.
Yeah, I mean, that's just one of the crazy. I had to fact check that. That's one of the craziest stats I've ever heard. This is a really, really good 49ers defense. Even though they've been a little off this year, they're still really good against the run, and I don't think anyone can debate that. San Francisco combined for just 44 rushing yards, which is absurd when you have Christian McCaffrey. And I mean, obviously, injuries hurt them, but I'd say that their playoff hopes are kind of completely gone at this point.
Yeah. I mean, you got it smack dab right. Packers win 38-10 is your final score from Green Bay. They improved to 8-3. Josh Jacobs, man, the trifecta of touchdowns. If you were playing hockey or soccer, they'd be throwing their hats on the field for a hat trick. Yeah, you're right. Jordan Love really didn't have to do much. I mean, they opened up a 17-point lead relatively early, so it wasn't like they needed the passing attack much. And when you play in Green Bay, the running backs are going to be a big part of things. Josh Jacobs has embraced that role coming from the Raiders. And now I just got to think. Just think with me here for a minute, Matt.
Mhm.
If the Packers hadn't released Aaron Jones before the year to make cap room, and they had Josh Jacobs and Aaron Jones. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
But there's no need for that, though.
There's no need for that, though.
And then if they have that, you're not seeing the same, stats that you're seeing right now out of Josh
What about
Jacobs.
the Sonic and Knuckles duo, though? They could be 2.0. They could be
The Lions
Jacobs
are different.
and Jones. They could be the Jays.
But the Lions are different. I don't know what's going on there, but That's insane. I don't think any team could recreate that if they tried.
Yeah, no, I agree. I was just sort of thinking outside the
Yeah.
box. And then
Mhm.
I want to go back to that NFC West playoff picture. With all these injuries, I agree. We can basically count out the 49ers. And you made the argument for the Cardinals, but now I want to talk about their schedule and the Seahawks, right? The Cardinals, you mentioned that the Seahawks, had been playing some mid-tacular football and had lost to some sort of invalid teams. I mean, you can look up and down the Cardinals schedule. When they play good teams, it doesn't always go right for them. I mean, you're talking about a week one loss to the Bills. You're talking about a loss to the Lions. You're talking about a blowout loss to the Commanders. They got crushed, Matt. Talking about a loss to the Packers, right? So this also, and then you're talking about a big time loss, which had a chance to really extend your lead in the division. A big time loss where you had no chance against Seattle. So Arizona also has not been playing consistent football against great teams. But then you look at their schedule coming up. Vikings, that's going to be a very tough one in Minnesota. Then you have the Seahawks again. Can they get revenge? Then you have 3 games that are four games that are very winnable. Patriots, Cardinals, Rams, we'll see. And then 49ers if they're still banged up, depending on what they're looking like. And then let's go back to things for the 49ers. I think you're right. CMC, obviously not the production we saw out of him last year. There's no way he's 100%. If he's
No.
100%, he's not running 11 times for 31 yards. That's not
Yeah.
that's not why he was the number one pick in fantasy this year. George Kittle continued to be a plus, but this is just the injuries are so bad for San Francisco, and they're such a star-studded lineup. To be sitting at 5-6, coming off an NFC Championship and a trip to the Super Bowl last year, is mind-boggling. Because I and a lot of people thought they would be back making deep playoff pushes, but it shows you how much injuries can plague a team. Green Bay picks up the 28-point win. Let's move over to a very high scoring game. Eagles 37, Rams 20, Sunday Night Football. Saquon Barkley makes a very solid case for Offensive Player of the Year. 26 carries, 255 yards, 2 touchdowns. His partner in crime, A.J. Brown, did almost as well. Actually, did not do almost as well.
No, not
109
almost as
yards and
well.
a touchdown. Jalen Hurts didn't have to do too much because the game plan was handed to Saquon and let him do the dirty work. 37 do the Eagles drop. They improved to 9-2. The Rams is a tough team to go ahead and play. Stafford, not a bad game. 24-36, 243, 2 touchdowns. Puka and Cobb continue to be a great duo, but it's not enough when you're playing this Eagles team that's on a roll. We mentioned this could be a game that could slow down the Eagles' momentum. It's not. The Eagles have all the momentum in the NFL behind them, and we made our list a couple weeks ago of who's better than the Chiefs. The Eagles are easily into that conversation now.
Yeah. Mhm.
If you had to ask me teams that would beat the 10-1 Chiefs, let's go. I'd say Bills, Lions, Eagles, Vikings.
You put the Vikings
You
in there?
wouldn't put the Vikings in there?
I'm not 100% sure. I think that's like a borderline team that maybe they go like 50-50 against the Chiefs if they played them 10 times, but
Okay,
I
Chargers, Ravens. Let's add to the list here. I mean, I know the Texans are playing bad, but at their peak, the Texans.
I
Uh,
just don't agree with that.
you don't agree with that? Is that a ridiculous take?
I think you're giving
That's
it
ridiculous.
I think you're giving it to too many teams. I'd say Ravens are another team that's on the border, like, they obviously lost to the Chiefs earlier this year. They probably deserve to win that game, obviously,
Mhm.
the Isaiah Likely toe and out of the end zone,
Yeah,
all
yeah,
that
yeah.
stuff. So I think that'd be really close. Chargers, um, at first that sounded a little crazy, but I'm really high on the Chargers, so I actually don't hate that one. I think they're an extremely good team and could maybe compete for the AFC West if the Chiefs start losing, but at this pace, I don't know if that's gonna happen. But I think there's probably around like 7 teams that you could make the argument for.
Mhm.
Maybe only 4 teams that actually are better than them.
I agree.
Mhm. Now, you really honestly covered this game really well, and there's only one thing you have to talk about to cover this game well, and that's Saquon Barkley because he was basically the entire game for the Eagles. Uh, honestly, the Rams had a pretty solid offensive game, and I think this would have won them the game against a lot of other teams. Matthew Stafford, 24 of 36, 243 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. Kyron got 16 carries for 72 rushing yards and a touchdown. And then Puka Nacua, 9 receptions, 117 receiving yards. And Cooper Kupp, 8 receptions for 60 receiving yards and a touchdown. Overall story of this game was obviously the rushing for Philadelphia. Philly had 222 more rushing yards than Los Angeles. And the Rams went 0-8 on third downs. Definitely cost them a little bit there. Eagles have won 7 straight. Still would expect them to go back to somewhat of what we saw earlier. I know we had a big conversation about this on the Tailgate show, but they're peaking right now. And it's just not possible, in my opinion, for a team to stay like this for the remainder of the season. Maybe they do for the remainder of the season, but at least not going into the playoffs. For the rest of the season, they can't stay like this, and I would be shocked if they did. Maybe it's just one game, maybe it's 2, maybe it's a whole slump that they go through, but at some point, they're going to go back to how they were playing earlier, and it's not going to look great for them. That's all I'm going to say. I still think they're a really, really solid team, and I'd easily put them over the Chiefs as well right now. That'd be a really interesting Super Bowl rematch to see what happened there from 2 years ago. But, of course, it's a little too early to predict that. It's only Week 12. With that being said, I can't thank you enough for coming on. I really do appreciate it. Is there anything else you want to say to the people watching before we wrap things up?
Yeah, Matt, I want to ask you a question. Were the Commanders playing over their heads at the beginning and the middle of the season? And are they coming back to earth now, or are they in a slump that they can get out of?
Their next game is against the Titans. So that's going to say a lot. I don't know if I can 100% answer that question right now, but their next game is against the Titans. I could give you a really confident answer next week. But for right now, whether they could get back, I have full faith in them. Not full faith in them. 50-50 shot that they get back. It's either what you think
That's
more.
it. You get
less?
a 50%. You're not.
No,
You
I
have
mean,
50% confidence that they'll play well against the Titans.
They haven't, not in their next game, but just being able to, I give them much better shot to win their next game, but bounce back in general. Maybe a 50-50 because they haven't been able to beat good competition, and their wins, I mean, I could pull them up right now. I don't know if I could say all of them off the top of my head right now, but a lot of them have been lackluster teams that don't necessarily make you feel that great about beating them.
Okay.
So, I mean, Giants twice, Panthers, and then Bengals and Cardinals are 2 teams where it's like those are solid teams, but still don't have the best record. Overall, this isn't a team that I'm super high on, at least this season. Talk to me in a few years, and yeah, we're talking about a championship contender. But this season specifically, Jaden's clearly having some struggles, at least recently. And the Commanders' offense as a whole, Terry McLaurin, one of the most inconsistent wide receivers in the NFL. If it weren't for that 186-yard touchdown, he would have had a terrible week. And there's been a lot of weeks this year where he's had 19 receiving yards, then 100, then 26, then 137. So it's like never really know what to expect out of Terry McLaurin. I'm still hopeful that we can at least make the playoffs, let alone make a run in the playoffs. But this next game is going to say a lot. If we lose to the Titans, it's over. If we beat them, maybe regain a little bit of momentum and make a run late in the season.
Okay, yeah, and I completely agree. That game for Washington is going to have big impacts. Against the Titans, going to have big impacts to see really what that team's made of and what they have. Matt, I want to ask you a question. Would you be okay with a new weekly segment at the end of each episode being introduced?
Depends what the segment is.
Okay, I'm thinking I'm going to call it Weekly Wrap. We each get to A, say a take and let the other person respond, or B, ask a question.
That's fair. Or are we starting this next week? Because I don't have a take on me right now.
Okay.
But,
okay. Yeah, that's fair. We're starting next week. Everybody make sure to stay tuned for our weekly wrap segment. Unless you have
potentially we have some stuff for the special Thanksgiving
Mm,
games this
yep.
week, this Thanksgiving special. So make sure you stay tuned for that. For everyone who made it up to this point, I can't thank you enough for watching. Again, I'm Matthew Heiserman alongside Josh Wolver for your Week 12 Highlight Haven NFL recap show. And as always, we will see you next time.